webinars with Trade Innovations, TRG Direct, and Third Wave. Today's speaker, Mr. Michael Laden, is going to go over the changing importer and CBP relationship, part one of a two-part series. And we had just a ton of people who are interested in joining us today. And so we're going to give it another minute or two before we get started, but we will be starting momentarily. All right, good afternoon again. I think we're going to try to get started here. I know we've got a lot of people. Today's presentation should be about 45 minutes, so we're going to get everyone out in a timely fashion. Well, spring is in the air, at least for most of us. We've had kind of a long, cold winter this year. If you're living in Bozeman like we are, the winter's not over. We got 6 inches of snow last night, and we may be keeping our sweaters and coats on until July 4th this year. But change is in the air, and not just where you and I are living, but also with our import and relationships that we have as an importer with CBP. We wanted to touch on that today because there's a lot of new things that are going on, as well as some things to just keep in mind that have been ongoing. Today's speaker, Michael Laden, Principal at Trade Innovations, is going to go over some of those things. And Michael, I'm going to kick it to you.
All right, thanks, Greg. And we could match your 6 inches of snow here in Minneapolis, where Old Man Winter hopefully is breathing his last gasp today as well. But we've got a lot of snow to the north, and it's still frigid temperatures outside. So, as Greg mentioned, we certainly want to be respectful of your time. So I'm going to go through the agenda very quickly today. I'm going to touch on CBP today. We're not going to spend a lot of time on where they've been in the past. We're going to focus more on where they're at today and then likely where they're going or where they'll be heading in the future. I'm going to spend some time talking about the automated commercial environment, or the acronym known as ACE, that we've heard so much about. Hopefully in the past couple of years there's been some new deployments recently and some more activity related to ACE, and I have a few thoughts about how ACE is going to change the environment for commercial processing in the future. I'm also going to spend a little bit of time talking about the C's, the Centers for Excellence and Expertise. This is a new concept being rolled out by CBP, and it will mean a lot of changes for the way we process our business going into the future. We're going to touch quickly on the priority trade initiatives that CBP has, the PTIs, talk quickly about our environment and how it's changed in recent years, and then I've got just a quick look at the future and what that holds. Time allowing, you notice it says questions there. It doesn't necessarily say answers. That's because I don't portend to have all of the answers to every possible question that you may pose. But I promise you one thing, if I don't, I'll tell you I can't answer that, but I'll get back to you hopefully with a credible answer in relatively short order. I'd much rather do that than to guess when confronted with a question that I may not know the answer to. So housekeeping, as Greg said, I've got about 45 minutes of material. I'll get to as many questions at the conclusion as I'm able. I've also got my contact information out there for you if you want to send me a separate email or give me a separate call. And you can chat your questions in the dialog box, which should be on the lower right-hand section of your screen, or at the conclusion you can raise your hand to speak, and Greg will help me monitor that. It's also important to point out that this is part one, really, of a two-part series. The next part will take place on May 14th, so you can either sign up for that at the conclusion of this, or if you don't have an invite, contact the team in Bozeman and they'll make sure to get one out to you. I thought I'd level set it with this. The most dangerous phrase in our language is, we've always done it this way, and that's true. We're continually, and I've said this about this business for a long time now, in somewhat of a perpetual state of change. And of course, some of us love it, others of us fear it. But by and large, unless it's just change for the sake of change, change is usually good. It means more opportunity. It means, in our business anyhow, cargo may move faster, you get greater visibility, there could be cost savings involved and other things. The bottom line is, I'm an old-time and long-term change merchant. I thrive on change, and that's one of the intriguing things about this business that's kept me attracted to it for virtually my entire career. I thrive on it, and I've found over the years that if it's not the government or CBP changing something, it's the carriers, and if it's not the carriers, it's the way we pay for our goods through the banks. There's been a number of very critical and important changes, especially, say, in the last 1 to 2 decades. Our industry has seen a significant amount of change, and again, I'm going to cover some of that in just a minute. There are a lot of naysayers when you propose change that said it couldn't be done. And back in the mid-1980s, for those that weren't around during that period, we had a customs commissioner at that time named William von Raab, and he issued a challenge basically to the customs brokers to automate their business or perish. Those were his infamous words, automate or perish. And that's because CBP at that time in the mid-80s was in the throes of rolling out their first automated commercial cargo or entry processing system. As he said that, there were naysayers, just as there are with everything. It can't be done. There's no way you can automate all of the trade activities, and the complexity of this business doesn't lend itself to automating. Yet, of course, Customs went forward and has, by and large, successfully automated it to the point that we're now in a paperless environment. But there were people, again, in the industry that said paperless couldn't be done. When the 24-hour manifest rule came in to play right after the tragic attacks of 9/11, a number of people said that that couldn't be done, that you could never get the carriers to submit their manifests 24 hours before the vessel departs at origin. That's just impossible. It can't be done. Yet today it is being done. And the same with advanced bill of lading numbers. As CBP pushed more and more for the next thing that people said couldn't be done, the importer security filing, as they pushed more and more towards that, it required yet another change to our industry, primarily impacting and affecting carriers and freight forwarders. But it was the ability to issue bill of lading numbers way upstream in advance of the cargo physically moving. And again, yes, the importer security filing, when CBP proposed that back in 2002, there was a hue and cry from the trade community and even the carriers, again, saying it couldn't be done. Yet here we are in 2014, and the ISF is now a part of our staple and environment, at least on the maritime side. So CBP today. Well, first and foremost, it's important to note that for the first time in many years now, I think it's been over 5 years, we actually have a confirmed Commissioner of Customs. His name is Gil Kurlowski. A couple of pictures, one of him actually being sworn in the upper right-hand column, and then his I guess they call that a press picture in the lower right-hand corner. But he was recently confirmed in March, on March 6th of this year, and he has a rather lengthy and prestigious, by the way, law enforcement career. So this kind of makes the trade a little bit nervous about heavy-handed enforcement or the potential that CBP will really swing the pendulum, if you will, more towards the enforcement side of the business. On April 2nd, the new commissioner testified before the House Appropriations Committee, or actually the Subcommittee on Homeland Security. And his testimony, a couple of snippets from that testimony, is CBP today has almost doubled in size since the pre-9/11 era. They're now at 60,000 employees, and they're charged or tasked with processing 2.38 trillion in trade volume, and that equates to 25 million containers that are either being imported or exported from our shores. Altogether, CBP still maintains its spot as the second largest contributor to the government's general fund, and last year they collected 42 billion in duties, taxes, and other revenues and fees. So CBP's mission, and I just want to go over this. I'm sure most of you know that CBP today is a tax collector, and that used to be, in the old days, way a long time ago, that used to be their primary focus, to collect and protect the revenue of the United States. Now you'll see in a minute that this mission has changed a little bit especially since the attacks of 9/11. But over the years, pre-9/11, CBP began to morph into not only a tax collector, but more of a law enforcement agency. They developed a robust regulatory audit protocol, for example, and started auditing importers, and then, of course, finding discrepancies, they started levying fines and penalties against those importers. So CBP's two primary missions then became collecting the revenue or the taxes and as a law enforcement agency. But then 9/11 changed all that, and they really became America's frontline border security agency on top of their other two functions or roles. And for the last several years, CBP has been very focused on getting the security aspects of our business right, if you will. They had a huge learning curve, if you look at it, in understanding what supply chains are and how many touch points and stakeholders there are overseas. And they've gotten their head around that pretty well now. So in a minute, I'll talk about the pendulum again, if you will, and which way it's swinging today. But suffice it to say, when 9/11 occurred, that dramatically changed CBP's mission and focus. And again, their first mission for all those years was always to collect the tax and revenue and protect it. And today now, if you look at their mission statement, the very first thing that jumps out at you is protecting our borders. They have today 5 priority trade initiatives, and I've got a slide on those in just a couple of minutes to chat about what those mean. And it's important to know that CBP has a very close working relationship with the ICE folks. And that, of course, stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and I call that CBP's evil twin. And I've said this before, some of you may have heard me say it before, but if the receptionist ever calls you at your company and says there's a couple of ICE agents in the lobby to see you, that's probably not going to be a very good day at your company, or for perhaps for you yourself. But suffice it to say, they are the heavy-handed enforcement arm of CBP, and while CBP may launch some investigations or actual penalty cases, when they find any sort of criminal wrongdoing, they get their evil twin ICE involved. So the pendulum, I've made a couple of references to it already. We used to say that the pendulum used to swing really 2 different ways. First to facilitation, and then over to enforcement, which is really just another word for compliance, being compliant. And over the years, again, citing back to my earlier comments about Commissioner Von Raab, while he challenged the trade, and most notably the brokers, to automate or perish, he was also very well known for his heavy-handed enforcement tactics. And during his tenure as Commissioner of Customs, he did some wildly unpopular things with the trade community. He seized an entire 747 aircraft. He started chasing down textile importers that were marginally or very nominally discrepant in quota categories or visa categories as it relates to weights on their shipments. He enacted several other almost punitive programs, all directed at really bringing the heavy hand of enforcement down around the trade. That led to a series, actually, of hearings on the Hill, and the pendulum then, when Von Raab stepped down, swung the polar opposite from the enforcement side over to facilitation, as we welcomed a new commissioner into the fold named Carol Hallett. And some of you who were around will remember Carol Hallett was one of the kindest and gentlest customs commissioners we've ever had. And she did a lot to not undermine the credibility of some of the programs that Von Raab stood up, but she did a lot to assuage the fears of the trade community that customs was really out of control with some of their enforcement programs. Today that's changed, and so now we see the pendulum swinging between facilitation on one side versus enforcement and or security on the other side. So either in the name of enforcement or sometimes in the name of security, CBP is and can, of course, make our lives miserable. So let's talk about ACE for a minute. As most of you know, ACE, the Automated Commercial Environment, is CBP's next generation system for processing our cargo and the shipments that we all bring in. It's really been in development since the late 1990s, and I'd be hard-pressed to tell you that it's cost us as taxpayers a little over $4 billion to develop this next generation system. In March of this year, so last month, CBP deployed the third of 7 future or critical deployments of ACE in the functionality of the system itself. So they're incrementally rolling out these large deployments of functionality. They've got 4 more to go, and they will be fully deployed unless there's a bump in the road on December 30th or 31st of 2016. So really that's a short period from now, 2 years, less than 2 years actually, and you can expect to see the entire ACE module or program stood up. So there are some trade benefits from this system, as well there should be. We paid a healthy sum of money to have it developed. One of the big ones, of course, is reporting. As an importer and as an ACE participant, you and your company can get access to all of the data that CBP currently holds related to your entries. And that's a very important and big benefit. Again, prior to ACE and ACE reporting, you had to do a FOIA, a Freedom of Information Request Act, to get at that data. And sometimes that not only took time and it cost a couple of $100 for each FOIA request, but then it came to you in a format that wasn't the most user-friendly type of format. Now, I don't say that ACE itself is very user-friendly either, but it's better than some of the old reports and formatting that they used to give us in the trade. And, of course, ACE allows the processing of most entry types. It's a big benefit. You can now do anti-dumping and countervailing entries by remote location filing, meaning that you don't have to be in the port of entry where the cargo is to physically clear from a remote location. So there are some big benefits for the trade, but there's also some big benefits for CBP, and I'll get into that in just a minute. ACE participation is my favorite 3 words, free of charge, FOC. So gaining access is a little cumbersome, as Greg would tell you. There's a rather lengthy application to complete and some other steps, but it is totally free of charge. And again, we've been encouraging clients to sign up for ACE for a long time now, since CBP first opened the reports module. And so, one more time, if you or your company are not currently using ACE, I can't encourage you enough to begin. This particular link that I've put in the PowerPoint here is a link to CBP's ACE page, and it not only gives you that particular page access or information about ACE, but access to the system itself. And again, at the end of this presentation, if you'd like a copy of the PowerPoint so you can access this link, we'd be happy to send it to you. Just contact the Bozeman team and they'll get a copy. And I think actually they're going to put these out on the Third Wave and TRG Direct website as well, a copy of this presentation. And the next link below that I've put, and I'm going to see if this actually works, if I can get it to open up quickly. This just came in this morning, and this is a brand new, hot off the press survey, satisfaction survey. CBP is wondering how many people in the trade are using ACE, and then if you are using it, what your level of satisfaction with the system is. And of course, they want this survey spread wide and far so they can get as much a good cross-section of feedback as possible. So again, the link is embedded into the PowerPoint, and if you'd like a copy of the PowerPoint at the end of today's session, please let us know, and we'll make sure you get a copy. So as I said earlier, CBP gets some benefits from ACE too. And for them, it really means improved and modernized processing. It also allows a virtual processing to support the C's. And I've got a slide coming up in just a couple of minutes on the C's and what a C is. So if that's an unfamiliar acronym to you, I'll explain that more in just a minute. But ACE really allows CBP to gate off certain volumes of work or entry processing, gate it off and distribute it to the various C's around the country. The complete deployment of ACE will also do something else. It will significantly enhance CBP's ability to data mine. And what does this mean? Well, it means a lot, at least to me it does. And let's just take one quick example. So for years now, going back into, I guess really the early 90s is when they created the MID, Manufacturer's Identification Number, that we all show on our entries, or the brokers put on our entries for us today. Few people have really closed the loop on what that is or why it's required. Well, that MID number, and of course that's an alphanumeric algorithm that's based on the foreign manufacturer's name and address. That MID number then essentially becomes that foreign supplier's account number with CBP. So every time an import comes in from that supplier at that location, the same MID is shown. CBP knows not only who the importer is, but of course who the exporter or who the factory is. Well, with the new data mining capabilities in ACE, CBP now has visibility to manufacturers and suppliers all over the world that are exporting their products to the U.S. So let me give you this example. A manufacturer in, let's say, China exports their product to an importer, a small importer in Miami, Florida. And when that shipment arrives, CBP, because it's perhaps a first-time importer or a first-time export to this country, when that shipment arrives, CBP decides they're going to examine it. And as they do, they find a problem that's common to us all. The goods aren't legally marked, NLM. CBP notes that and, of course, issues a marking notice to the importer of record in Miami. But they also trigger a flag in ACE under that MID number that shows that this exporter to the U.S. or this supplier has had a violation in marking. Well, guess what? The next importer, let's say someone in Colorado, sends an order to that facility, and they ship the goods to Colorado to a totally separate company, a totally separate importer. When that MID number gets put in by the broker or the self-filer in Colorado into CBP's system, the CBP officers in Colorado in charge of releasing it are going to have visibility to the fact that this particular supplier, if you will, has had priors, that they've previously sent a shipment to the U.S. that hasn't been marked. And in all likelihood or all probability, that's going to trigger an exam. So the one thing, again, that ACE does is it gives CBP and their numbers crunchers a much deeper look at the data that's passing through the system. And then through nuances like this in the system, they're much better able to control and track deviant importers or deviant exporters to the U.S. So That's just one example. ACE also gives, again, much better visibility as a result then to discrepant shipments. And it also means that CBP will do a better job in the targeting, the automated targeting of cargo. So I talked about Cs quickly. For those that aren't familiar, about a year ago, I guess it's been, CBP launched a pilot called the Centers for Excellence and Expertise. And really what this does is it brings all of CBP's expertise on a single industry or commodity into one strategic location. And there are currently 10 Cs in operation. These are the Cs and their locations. And it's not anticipated, at least at this point, that there will be any more Cs opened or created, at least through the remainder of this year. So right now there are 10 Cs in operation, and they have now announced that while that was an ongoing pilot, and in order to have your entries and goods processed in one of those Cs, importers had to make application to do so. CBP is now ready to move away from that and just automatically start processing all entries for the same class and kind of goods through the Cs that they have in operation today. So what it does is it means that the revenue will continue really to be carried out and collected by the ports of entries, but the Cs will be performing entry validation activities. They'll also be doing a lot of post-entry work, so they'll be looking at protests and the post-entry amendments and summary corrections that may need to be submitted. Cs will also be issuing the infamous Forms 28 and 29, the request for information and notices of action that we're sometimes prone to. They may also, again, get involved in processing prior disclosures, quota entries, and despite the fact that quota on textiles has all but been eliminated, there are still some categories of items that are covered by quotas. Those still need to be processed at the port of entry versus being processed by the Cs, and that's, of course, to accommodate the special needs related to timing with the presentation of a quota entry. But then most all other entry types, including FTZs, anti-dumping, countervailing, and the like, will be processed by the Center for Excellence and Expertise. In CBP's mind, this, and it really does, it helps them, this really eliminates, by having a C, the redundant type of work that, especially on compliant imports. So hopefully this will also reduce the numbers of notices of requests for information and notices of action that the trade community will be getting. There will also, according to CBP, be fewer cargo delays. They're going to reduce their costs by implementing the Cs. It offers us, as importers, greater predictability in how our shipments are going to be handled and treated, and greater uniformity. And then by having the Cs, it allows the port of entry to focus their shift to higher risk. So they can get into more enforcement work. They're going to focus on import safety, of course, increased revenue protection, and then hopefully as well reduce the economic loss related to intellectual property theft. All of these combined translate into improved enforcement results. So if you notice a common theme here, it's more complex enforcement work, improved enforcement results, and today CBP and that pendulum is swinging back, we believe, more towards the enforcement and security side of our business than it is to facilitation. The Cs, of course, have cross-functional expertise, meaning you'll have a single point of contact at the C, and honestly, that should result in an improved relationship, especially for small and medium-sized importers. It'll give you a much faster process for resolving issues or concerns that may crop up during the import. And again, you increased uniformity and transparency for the trade. It also, and if you think about this, it's true, it creates an environment for really in-depth learning. And so it allows CBP to leverage all that knowledge and expertise into one center and, again, therefore, better control their enforcement activities. There's a 17-page C trade process document that Customs published back in March, last month of this year. And if you're interested in getting a copy of that document, same thing as making a request for this presentation, just contact our Bozeman team either by email or at the end of today's session, and we'll make sure you get a copy of that document. And it goes more in depth into what the Cs are and what they're going to be doing. So when I was getting ready for today's show or webinar, I've been aware for a long time, actually, CBP has had these priority trade initiatives, the PTIs. And I don't know, I can't for the life of me figure out when they changed it. And this is going to be a very interesting change. And I think I know who caused this change as well. But last year, when you looked at CBP's website, they cited 7 priority trade initiatives. Earlier this week, I went back to that site, and it's been reduced to 5. So these are the 5 areas that CBP, both headquarters and the field offices at the ports, and especially the Cs, are really focusing their attention on. Anti-dumping, countervailing, import safety, we already saw some stuff about that in the intellectual property rights. Textiles and apparel, even though quota has been eliminated, textiles and wearing apparel continue to be high on CBP's targeting and radar list. And then the effective use of trade agreements. And if you've undergone a GSP or a NAFTA audit recently, you know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, you might at some point in the coming year or two. CBP is very focused on the fact that a lot of importers are taking advantage of trade agreements, free trade agreements, and without having appropriate certification that the goods qualify. And so they've been out conducting a number of audits around the country, and their theory has proven correct. And so we anticipate that they will be ratcheting up the trade agreement audits in the coming year. But the 2 that were PTIs that were missing were fines and penalties and revenue. Now those last year were called out as separate PTIs, and again they've been removed, and CBP has reduced the published PTIs down to 5. I suspect though, while they're still focused like a laser on issuing fines and penalties and collecting more revenue, that they got some feedback, most notably I believe from COAC, which is an advisory group to CBP and to DHS, that showing fines and penalties as a priority trade initiative wasn't as partnership friendly as CBP likes to portray themselves today. So while I believe they went ahead and removed those as 2, I don't believe there's any less focus on fines and penalties and collecting revenue. It's also important to note that CBP is hiring. they've been authorized to hire up to 2,000 additional CBP officers. They're in support of that, they're going to identify and screen at least 4,300 people. And of course, additional resources usually translates into more enforcement. This typically will mean more QRA, quick response audits, or full-blown focused assessments for importers. So what's changed in our environment? Well, most importers today have moved already or are in the process of moving to a completely paperless operation. When you think about it, we've migrated from a paper-based business to bits and bytes, and today we're in a digital world, and most of our data that we're using both for clearance and entry with CBP is all electronic. And security is certainly a greater concern. Since 9/11, 9/11/01, security wasn't even on the radar before that. And of course, right after that, security has been a much greater concern, and it's not only a concern about our supply chain, but we're concerned about data. Of course, there's been some very notable data breaches recently and data integrity issues with some companies. And last but not least, it's a concern too for identity. I did a session at the ICPA, the Import Compliance Professionals Association, earlier this year on importer identity theft. And that's really coming into vogue, believe it or not. And so the same way that we as consumers may have our identity stolen by crooks and thieves, we've been finding more and more cases of importers, actual companies having their identity theft or their identities thieved or stolen, and then used for nefarious purposes in importing illegal or illegitimate cargo, usually related to intellectual property rights issues. But when you look at it, the Internet has really had a profound impact on the way we do business all the way around. And for those, again, that know me, I'm a much bigger fan of insourcing rather than outsourcing. We have, everything has its place, and certain companies have certain needs that can't be met by insourcing. But whenever given the option, and especially when I, as the importer, own all of the liability, I am much more inclined to insource something versus outsource, unless I can outsource, of course, the liability that goes with it. If I can outsource that to another company, then I'm good with outsourcing. But, of course, in our world, related to customs and customs compliance, you can't outsource that. So it's critical, in my mind, that importers think more about insourcing than outsourcing. Companies, of course, are taking compliance today very, very seriously, and more importers are graduating to things like direct filing. It gives them greater control, better visibility and velocity in their supply chains, much better accuracy related to the data being submitted to customs, of course, savings, and in some respects, even greater job security. So I like to share this slide, and I put it together and didn't realize what I had until someone stopped me once and went, "That was the most profound slide I've ever seen." And I'm doing this, of course, with the client's permission. But I put together this slide for a client a number of years ago who wanted us to sit down with their executive leadership team and explain to them, the executives that is, the compliance department's role in keeping the company compliant. And as I got to thinking about that, in a good way that I could most senior leadership loves the visuals. They love You know, a picture's worth 1,000 words. As I got to thinking about that, I thought, well, there's a pretty easy way to depict our responsibilities. And I used to say, as a trade compliance professional myself, our tentacles from the trade compliance group reach out and touch practically every other area of the company. In order to have a successful and highly compliant import operation, we need to be in touch with almost all of these internal stakeholders that I'm showing you. Now again, I realize this is all dependent too on the size of your company and the size of your operation and volumes and so forth. If you're a small 30-person company, it's very likely you don't have many of the departments that I'm showing here, but I'm pretty certain you probably have people that have that responsibility. So this is really all scalable. But then I thought, well, we have to not only manage and interact with all of those departments internally, but wow, look at this laundry list of external stakeholders and other partners and government agencies that I also have to manage as a compliance professional. And of course, we fall right in the center of that. When I put that slide up at our clients' offices, that really hit home with senior leadership. It kind of helped them close the loop, if you will. I'm like, wow, we get it. And no, they're not just another department that thinks they're important or have a critical role in our business. They do have. And look at all of these relationships and partnerships that the trade compliance group has to manage. So again, it was a very eye-opening experience for senior leadership to look at it this way. And I invite you to, if you find some value in it, again, to get a copy of the presentation today and certainly use this slide as you see fit. So things to watch for. Well, the new commissioner is going to settle in, get his bearings, and I'm sure leave some sort of a mark on the agency itself. We're not quite sure what yet. In the meantime, CBP is also working on a complete rewrite of Section 111 of the Customs regulations, which really pertains to brokers. So later this year, you'll start seeing Federal Register notices and proposed rule changes related to that rewrite. You're also, on top of it, going to see, I believe, a more robust broker management effort by CBP. And something that's recently come to light, and there's been two cases, one just a couple of weeks ago, where a couple of companies have been fined in the millions of dollars. But CBP has just recently, within the last 3 months, so the last quarter, announced two major cases of finding importers conducting a dual invoicing scheme. In other words, they're working with their vendor to present or create one invoice for being presented to customs, and yet a second invoice to be presented to the importer for payment of the goods. And of course, there's a discrepancy between the price being declared to CBP versus the price or amounts being paid to that supplier. That's bad news. And having found two such cases just recently and hitting both importers for 7-figure fines and penalties, it's my hunch that CBP is going to really zero in on this, and especially given their newfound data mining capabilities with ACE. Then last but not least, and I hope I'm not the first to mention this, but to you, there's the possibility of a West Coast labor disruption this summer. The contract with the ILWU is due to expire on July 1st at 5 p.m. Pacific time. And if it expires and there is some sort of a disruption or strike, remember it will impact virtually every aspect of our business, even those shippers that are only using air freight. Because when a strike comes about, one of the first things that dries up is air freight space and capacity. So you're best advised to, as an importer, and especially if you're in the maritime world, keep your ear close to the ground. We're encouraging clients right now to start looking at contingency plans, and we believe, anyhow, that the likelihood of a strike this year is greater than it has been in recent years because the issues are pretty contentious. In all likelihood, it's pretty well thought throughout the industry that there will be some sort of a continuation or extension beyond the July 1st date. But then once we get past the 4th of July and Independence holiday and move more into the middle and end of July, if there's been no resolution and they're not anywhere near an agreement, we believe that there will in fact be a walkout or a strike. And then, last but not least, the International Trade Data System. And ITDS is a brand new acronym that you should be adding to your vocabulary and your glossary. If you're not sure what that is, it's the next iteration of ACE. And really, part 2 of our seminar that'll be on, again, May 14th, will cover ITDS, what it is, how it works, and some things to look forward to when they get that deployed. So thanks for attending. Again, we want to be respectful of your time, and I see there's a few minutes left for some questions. But I appreciate the fact that you've taken time from your day to spend an hour with us today, and hope that you found the presentation useful and beneficial. And if you've got some questions, I think Greg will help me monitor those, and can also open up the phone lines if you don't want to chat and you want to vocalize your questions. So again, thanks for joining us, and I hope you found it useful. And Greg?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Ned, you might be able to see some of the chats on the side as well. The first one, Mike, is about the MID, and it's an interesting question because many people out there have, over the years, ended up with MIDs that are different for the same manufacturer.
Right.
You know, that algorithm is, you know, subject to
it is
that name and address. How do you think that A, that's going to kind of remain in effect, or is some kind of a new identification number like what they've done within the FDA shipping and manufacturer side come into play?
Yeah, I don't think that there'll be a new iteration of the MID, Greg. First of all, yeah, I know it's an imperfect science, and I know there's a lot of garbage out there. But by and large, if you're importing the same stuff from the same factory or manufacturer month over month, year over year, CBP is going to recognize that. And with their new and refined ACE system, I also believe they have the ability to go in and determine which one of the MIDs are garbage and which ones aren't, and which ones have been perhaps duplicated or replicated by subtle nuances in the name or the address, and they'll be able to clean that up. I don't see them coming out with a new algorithm. This one's been in place for all these years. But few people, you know, I was shocked when they first came up with this algorithm years and years ago that people complied with it, of course, and by and large it was their broker complying and creating the MIDs. But people didn't really make that leap of faith as to what is this and why are we providing it, or what's it for. And all of a sudden, when I start pointing out to people that, yeah, that's your factory's account number with CBP, their eyes bug out of their head. They're like, what? And, well, yeah, what do you think they're gathering this data for? So again, while I don't think there'll be a change, I think they're going to clean up the MIDs, the garbage ones that are out there, and then hone their review and focus to those companies that have had some compliance issues in the past.
Well, I think we're all living in a very painful world of data mining and oversight by the government. So that's nothing new there. It's only going to continue and probably become more refined, as you say. The next, so with the new adoption of Kurlikowski as the commissioner, and his background being law enforcement, should we expect a harder line on ISF enforcement?
Oh, good question. Perhaps. I've got to give CBP some credit at this point, and you know me, I have this love-hate relationship with them, but this is one instance where, as they've rolled out ISF, they've been very level-headed about it, at least up until now. And even now that we're in the penalty phase, they're still being very level-headed and even-keeled, if you will. Yeah. So not a lot of penalties have been issued, but of course, Greg, you and I are aware of some that have come out.
Well, and I can even add what I think was some very interesting information that came out at the ICPA conference. Yep. And while none of this is published, none of this is confirmed or written down or anything, we did have a presentation by an official who discussed this, and it was interesting because we'd been moving through this informed enforcement period, or whatever that term is, I forget, and all of a sudden CBP saw a decrease in compliance. They were in the low 90s, which they were considering kind of good for ISF compliance, and all of a sudden it fell off to the low 80s. And little sirens went off, and they're like, no, we can't let this happen, because this is a security item. We're not trying to hurt trade, but we've got to know what's going on. So what happened was that was then when they instituted the, quote, move to full enforcement date of July 9th, and, as he stated, rather amazingly, all of a sudden we're back into the low 90s as far as...
Funny how that works.
Yeah. So what it suggested, at a 30,000-foot point of view is, guys, we just want compliance in ISF. We don't want to hurt you, but we want this data. So that was number one. The second part of it was a lot of people were asking, how long is the tail of my potential regulatory fine and penalty going to be? Because it's not written in the regulations, therefore it falls to the 5-year, or he even stated 6-year statute of limitations. So we know we got 5 years on the entry. And surety was very concerned about that too, because all of a sudden your ISF starts to look like an ADD entry. Right. And so what is much the same way as the regulation is written 24 hours prior to lading, well, we don't have lading data, so we are, in fact, enforcing it based on date of departure, which we do have data on based on our vessel departure information. What we're going to do is we're going to take what currently is a process whereby the ports upload the ISF infractions, if you will, to home office, and within 6 months they're going to make a determination as to whether or not they're going to send out a fine penalty. Now again, this is not hard and fast and written, but that is how they're rolling this out. So it gives us all a little bit more, meat to how enforcement is going to continue. They have not written the final regs. It was suggested that this would be done by summer, at which point we'll go through the public period of publication. We can all take a look at them, and that should take another year. So the expectation is we're probably going to be in the current kind of regulatory environment until sometime in the summer, perhaps even the fall of 15. So interesting.
Well, and very quickly, the rub on, or the word I'm getting on the new commissioner is he has this heavy enforcement background, but he's a pretty darn nice guy. And he's just agreed
Well, the picture looked that way, right?
Well, no, the picture to me, and I'm not a good judge of character, especially by pictures, that he looks like one tough hombre in that picture, to me, anyhow.
A little solemn.
But he has agreed to be the keynote speaker here in Minneapolis, of all places, at the American Association of Exporters and Importers, AAEI, later this year. So he's at least getting out and making the circuit, if you will. And if you're interested in him and what he might have to say and his demeanor and everything else, I encourage you to find the next locale that he's speaking at and attend. But he isn't hiding behind the desk in the hollowed halls in Washington there. He is getting out and making the circuit. And really that's our opportunity as the trade community to impress upon him the importance of balancing facilitation with enforcement. Yeah. And by the way, Greg, my email is already lighting up for copies of the presentation. So if you can post it.
Yeah, we're gonna try to post it to the Blinko Third Wave site, TRG Direct, and you'll have it, of course, at Trade Innovations, and we'll try to send out hard copies of it as well because we're trying to record this today to help out. So we're starting to go a little bit over here. Just one last quick, and again along the same lines of enforcement. You mentioned that CBP is looking to hire another 2,000 people.
Yeah.
Where do you think that's going to go? Is it going to go? Because many of us in the trade are kind of, wishing there was a little bit more help at the ports. Yeah. We're trying to get things cleared and fix things up.
Yeah, I honestly think, and I got that actually based, the commissioner, the new commissioner testified before the House Appropriations Committee on April 2nd of this year. And I actually have an entire transcript of his testimony. And I got that nugget out of his testimony that they've been approved to hire 2,000 more. They're going to bring in 4,300 to review. I honestly believe those 2,000 will mostly be attributed to the cargo side, both land border as well as seaports. I think they're going to carve out some of the 2,000, and then not to be the boogeyman here, but some of those 2,000 will also be moved over to audit as they really ramp up their auditing prowess. But the majority, I believe, are going to be border and port CBP officers, so inspectors, if you will.
Yeah, yeah.
Greg, if I can just jump in for 1 second. We have a lot of questions. We have about 13 questions that were mailed into us, and I think in respect of time, these will be passed on to Mike
all right.
for review and possibly incorporated in the next webinar, which, as you said, is on May 14th.
Yeah, and Ned, if you've got their names or email addresses, I'd be happy to email them the answer back, and then we can incorporate them also into the next session. But at least so that the questioner gets as direct of an answer as I'm able to provide. I'd love to.
And I'll do that.
All right, great. Well, so in closing, thanks again, everyone, for joining today. It was very informative, and we'll look forward to seeing you for part 2 on May the 14th. Thanks again, and have a great day.